Ladies and gentlemen, I am Yusril, the game is Star Trek Online, and this is a first look at the new heavy cruiser refit that Cryptic released today, the 28th of August 2014. This latest offering consists of an improved Tier 3 cruiser, the Warp Burst Capacitor console, and the Constellation skin, all for 1000 Zen, $10 or at current prices about 190,000 dilithium. The hull itself will be of interest to Federation and Federation-aligned Romulan characters that have just made level 30, adding a universal ensign and extra science console to the standard heavy cruiser loadout. This leaves it slightly more flexible than the same tier Excelsior, the advanced heavy cruiser to use Cryptic's term, able to simultaneously deploy tactical team, fire at will and a basic attack pattern, but it does trade away the second engineering lieutenant power slot to do this, so some of the more advanced engineering techniques aren't really available. Not that it matters too much, since the moment said characters hit level 40, most dedicated cruiser drivers will trade up to a Galaxy for the 4-4 weapons fit and commander engineering, while the rest will either succumb to the lure of pew pew and get a Defiant, or decide that 7 years away from it all suits them just fine, and they'll get an Intrepid in that case. So there's no reason for a level 50 player to bother with this, right? Actually, wrong. Captains with Tier 5 heavy cruisers can use the Constellation skin on those ships if they have a taste for a modernised Stargazer look. Cryptic have created a model that is reasonably faithful to the miniature seen in the next-gen episode The Battle. There are some differences to the studio model, most notably that the forward shuttle bay doors are slatted vertically rather than horizontally, which actually makes more sense if you try and think about where the doors would have to go when they open. And the outer leading edges of the warp nacelles are straight rather than having a slight curve, while the buzzard collectors have a red glow. It's that last detail that feels odd to me. I can't remember ever seeing motion picture style nacelles coloured like that before. It would have been nice to have the option for darkened nacelles or just the blue glow at the rear, but hey ho. The real selling point for level 50 and level 60 once Delta Rising hits and we have access to the Tier 6 ships with their shiny is the Warp Burst Capacitor. This universal console can be used on any starship, and yes, that includes Romulan warbirds, in any console slot, and it enables the legendary Picard maneuver. This is a triggered ability with a 2-minute cooldown. After a 1-second activation, presumably while your captain straightens his shirt out, your ship will jump forward 6 kilometers, leaving a duplicate image behind. Since the enemy haven't yet figured out just shoot both of them, and get horribly confused as a result, you not only become untargetable, but you gain a 15% damage bonus for a grand total of 5 seconds. And before you ask, yes, it stacks with the ambush buff from decloaking, so you get that extra little bit of damage for a surprise beam overload. This 5 seconds of untargetability, this teleport, and this damage bonus are a lot more useful than they sound. The teleportation function alone is handy. It allows a quick exit from a tricky situation, say the inside of a Tholian web, or the crystalline entity's blast radius. Romulan players can mix it with a singularity jump for an 11 kilometers and change jump in a couple of seconds, allowing them to rapidly engage or disengage targets at up to 20 kilometers distance, and a particularly vicious Tavaro driver might consider using the Picard maneuver, firing its destabilized torpedo at close range, and then leading with a singularity jump to both clear the blast themselves and leave a gravity well to make sure their victims can't. The extra damage and temporary untargetability allows for a rapid close-range ambush, particularly if you add it to the traditional vape mix available to tactical captains in cloak-capable vessels. The downside? Well, it's a console, and competition for console slots is pretty hot right now, even with the announcement of the 11th console slot hull in Delta Rising. So the principal problem is going to be one of opportunity cost. You're going to have to trade something else to make room for this maneuver. It certainly won't replace a weapon console, let's face it, there's very little that will, but it's definitely in the second rank of consoles, the ones that are extremely useful with a little creative thought, and you would generally be asking yourself why not include this rather than why. There's also the issue of price. Since most top tier players will effectively pay 1,000 Zen for this console, after all besides alts there'll be little use for the hull and most will get little or no mileage from the costume, the question becomes, is it worth it? And as things stand, after about 6 hours playing with this manoeuvre, my opinion is yes, probably. The extra damage makes it attractive to Vapors and most other tactical builds. Most players will find the teleport handy in a sticky situation or if they just need to get somewhere in a hurry, and 5 seconds off people's targeting systems can make for a handy panic button. The console will also stay useful regardless of level into Delta Rising, barring other shiny toys being introduced of course, since it's a self-contained unit with no ties to skills, level, hit points, etc. Even if you don't want to spend hard cash on it, 1,000 Zen isn't too hard to acquire as a medium-term goal if you're willing to slug into some dilithium grinding, especially with the current Crystalline Cataclysm event, since that has 50,000 Zen as part of its payout. The other problem is not a problem with the Constellation per se. It's the Klingons, who have been left out in the cold with this release. I realise that most of the player base is Federation, that as a result that's where the money tends to be, and that's where it's tempting for Cryptic to focus resources, particularly with Delta Rising about to hit its crunch phase, and all hands to the pumps on that. That being said, it would have been nice to see an equivalent release for Team Red, especially since this is an extra 15% spike damage that the Klingons, and particularly Klingon-aligned Romulans, can't match compared to Federation-aligned Romulans, and we'll have to see what the overall effect is, both to PvP balance and the general feeling that the Feds are the favoured faction at times. So, overall the Constellation, or more accurately the console, seems to be a decent if pricey buy at first glance. Most players will find some use for it, the only key questions being 1. Where are you going to get 190,000 odd dilithium? Current prices are a little on the high side. And 2. Which console will you be booting to make room for it? I have been Yusril. Those were my first impressions of the new Constellation Starship and, more importantly, the Warp Burst Capacitor, and until next time, farewell.